welcome to Black Power Blueprint Live. We are broadcasting here not only from our Facebook page, but also from our YouTube channel, which is YouTube/Black Power Blueprint. Please do subscribe to our YouTube page, give us a thumbs up, and get notifications. You can also like the Black Power Blueprint Facebook page, follow us on Twitter and on Instagram, and please do share this live stream far and wide. I am Jamie Simpson from the Black Power Blueprint Reparations Committee here at the beautiful Uhuru House on 18th Avenue South in St. Petersburg, Florida. And tonight we have a really powerful show that features Chairman Omali Yeshitela of the African People's Socialist Party and Benjamín Prado, Undersecretary of the Central Committee of Unión del Barrio, the organization of Mexican people on this side of the colonial border established after much of Mexico was stolen from the Mexican people in the 19th century. From Aquaba Hall at the center of the Black Power Blueprint in St. Louis, Missouri, we greet Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru, Chairman. And from San Diego, Uhuru.
He's from Colorado right now.
Okay, Uhuru. And from San Diego, California, on stolen Mexican land, we welcome Benjamín Prado. Uhuru, Benjamín.
Uhuru. Uhuru.
It's an honor to have you on tonight. And here in St. Petersburg, we have the director of the African People's Socialist Party's Agitprop Department, Akile Anai. Uhuru, Akile.
Uhuru.
And I'd also like to introduce Penny Hess, chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Uhuru, Jamie, and Uhuru, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru, Benjamín. It's great to have you here. And Uhuru, Director Akile. This is going to be a powerful, powerful program on Black Power Blueprint Live tonight. And I just want to start by saluting Chairman Omali Yeshitela, under whose leadership I have had the honor of working for more than 40 years, almost 42 years, and that we're here tonight. Jamie and I are here as part of the Black Power Blueprint Reparations Campaign, raising resources for the Black Power Blueprint, the program for Black Power that's particularly in St. Louis, led by Deputy Chair Yeshitela, who I want to salute, under the vision and the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party and Chairman Omali Yeshitela, that has acquired properties and built the Uhuru House with volunteers and resources from people like you who have put in thousands of dollars towards this program, and which has developed very, very rapidly and is building economic and political power into the hands of the African working class, especially in St. Louis, and which is also building campaigns like the Keep 28, the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. It has powerful Sunday rallies led by the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement and President Kalambayi Andanet. Every Sunday, you can see those on Facebook. It's a powerful movement there. So I just really want to salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela. I also salute, as I said, Deputy Chair Yeshitela, who's taken the vision of the chairman, put it on the ground in St. Louis, and so rapidly transformed in just a few months, that is making the city and the African community there an exuberant example of what power in the hands of the African working class and what dual and contending power is really about. So I also salute Undersecretary Benjamín Prado and salute Unión del Barrio, which I have had the honor to know because I am a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the organization of white people organizing in the white community for reparations to African people under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, that has enabled me to see and to know and see in action Unión del Barrio over many years, and to see, a very exciting movement that is vibrant and very dynamic, based in San Diego, but other places throughout the Southwest, indigenous, Mexican people fighting for the return of the stolen land and resources. So, you know, we just really want to salute this program tonight. And we are also, as we do every Tuesday night, raising resources again tonight for the Black Power Blueprint.
Uhuru, absolutely. And I want to echo everything Chairwoman Penny said, the illustrious lineup of guests on the show tonight. And we also want to salute the material solidarity from all of you who have contributed a total of more than $60,000 for this project so far. Currently, we are raising an additional $20,000. And by the end of the year, that will help to fund the renovation of a fourplex apartment building that is happening as we speak to house workers from the African Independence Workforce Program, and the installation of a 50-foot flagpole for a giant African flag, the red, black, and green, paving, lighting, and landscaping in the empty lots, expanding the community garden, and so much more. So far, we have raised $7,567 toward our $20,000 goal, putting us at 37% of our goal. And if you want to contribute to that, you can go to blackpowerblueprint.org. And tonight we want to raise $833 tonight. And that will bring us, if I'm not mistaken, to $8,400, bringing us just about to 40% of our way to our goal.
Right, and we have some people that we're going to thank in just a minute who have already contributed earlier in the day, which is very exciting.
Yes.
So we will be thanking them and talking more about that a little bit later in the program, but I'm very excited to get started with this interview, which will be conducted by Director Akile. And just to say that in the 1960s, when, as the chairman always talks about, revolution was the main trend in the whole world, that there was a revolution going on inside the borders of this stolen land here, when the African Revolution was at the center of a revolutionary movement that included the struggle of the indigenous people, Mexican people, Puerto Rican people, oppressed and colonized peoples inside the borders of the United States, created a genuine revolutionary movement here, and that was crushed and hit by a counterinsurgency by the US government. And it has been the work of the African People's Socialist Party, which is getting ready to have its 7th Congress in St. Louis, October 6th through the 12th, just coming up in a few weeks. It's going to be very exciting, and members of Unión de Barrio will be there as well. It's going to be very, very historic, but it has been the African People's Socialist Party and organizations like Unión de Barrio that have kept the revolution, the anti-colonial revolutions inside the borders of the United States alive, and have been mobilizing and winning and bringing back the period in which revolution is becoming the main trend in the entire world again today. So with no further ado, I would like to turn it over to Director of Party's Agitprop, Akile Anai. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Well, first, before I start, I just really want to appreciate and say that it's an honor to be able to interview Chairman Omali Yeshitela of the African People's Socialist Party, my leadership, and also Benjamín Prado of Unión de Barrio. It is an extremely deep honor and just a really profound opportunity. And without further ado, I'm going to ask Chairman Omali Yeshitela. I would like to start by asking you to say a few words to open up the program, saluting the unity of the African People's Socialist Party and Unión de Barrio. Uhuru.
I want to thank you, Comrade Sister Director of Agitation and Propaganda, Akile Anai, and want to express my appreciation to all of you, comrades from the Solidarity Movement, who have been working so seriously to build reparations with the Black Power Blueprint campaign that we're involved in. And I really have to send a statement of appreciation to Comrade Deputy Chair Ona Zene Yeshitela, because the truth of the matter is that none of the words that we put out about making the revolution can mean anything if there is not actual work on the ground being done to implement that. And Comrade Ona Zene Yeshitela has had a profound impact on the work of our party and overall, and the work to build the Black Power blueprint, and has been a major force in changing the situation of African people in St. Louis. That is to say, her leadership has provided that, and I wanted to acknowledge that. And I do want to express my appreciation, and I want us to be able to celebrate the unity of Unión de Barrio and the African People's Socialist Party. It is a deep and profound unity. It is historical, and it is strategically critical unity that we have developed over the years. And at a time when imperialism, U.S. and world imperialism, is experiencing a profound crisis that is visible to everybody in the world. Everybody in the world can see it. And some people it frightens, correctly so. Everybody who is attached to the future of imperialism consciously and actually see their future being there should be fearful of this. But the oppressed peoples of the world, upon whose backs and necks imperialism has rested for 500 years or more, have nothing to fear, except our lack of organization in most instances. And this is one of the things that makes Unión de Barrio and the relationship with the party so important. It is a critical relationship. It is critical. We'll talk about the fact that our relationship as political organizations is one that has existed for more than 3 decades. And that's important that we've had this relationship. But the thing that really gives significance to a relationship more than 3 decades is the fact that we have within current borders of the United States revolutionary organizations that have existed and struggled for more than 3 decades. Mm-hmm. So this is not like a movement that just happened and we ran into each other in the heat of heightened struggle. It is a relationship that has developed and matured over more than 3 decades. And now, as the crisis of imperialism reaches this critical point, the significance of that relationship will become more and more clear to people outside of our party and outside of our movement as we move forward. So I am extraordinarily proud of this relationship. In addition to it being the political relationship that it is, we refer to it as an alliance, and I'm not even sure that does it justice. In addition to it being this political relationship, we have traveled with each other. We have slept in each other's homes. We have developed not only relationships as compañeros, which we think, comrades, which we think is the most important political relationship that you can have, but it is a relationship that has also developed a very subjective and personal component to it, that we are compañeros, we are comrades, we are friends. And so I cannot say enough about our appreciation for this relationship with Unión de Barrio, and then of course with compañero Benjamín, with whom we have worked and for a long time. And there's no way to talk about, from my perspective, Unión de Barrio and our relationship without mentioning Comrade Ernesto Bustillo, who a founding member of that organization, who had a deeply profound impact on our relationship, the relationship of our parties, the relationship of our peoples, and the relationship with me. And it has been deep and personal and subjective and political and everything that one could imagine. And I think that Compañero Ernesto Bustillo is one of the real unspoken giants of the revolutionary movement of the Americas. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Uhuru, thank you, Chairman. And now to Comrade Benjamín. Can you tell everyone online, what is Unión del Barrio? When did it form? What are your goals? What kind of projects and campaigns have you taken on over the years?
Uhuru comrades, first of all, I do want to appreciate this invitation, this profound honor to spend this moment in time, engaging in this type of political discussion. First, for the historical relationship, as Comrade Chairman has laid out, but also because it really does represent the necessary alliance to build political economic power, really to overturn this sick capitalist system that has been attacking us ever since its inception. So Unión del Barrio is a political organization that was founded in 1981 by veterans of the Chicano power movement of the 1960s and 1970s. Veterans who had accumulated already decades of experience struggling in the ranks of organizations such as the Brown Berets, Mecha, the Raza Unida Party, and other movement organizations that had as its objective to really create power and to challenge all the terrible attacks that have been coming down against our communities and people since the invasion and occupation of our lands. So Unión del Barrio was founded in an era where there were significant defeats to U.S. imperialism. 1981, the victory of the Vietnamese people for their liberation, in Nicaragua, the Sandinistas coming to power. But it was also a period where our movements had suffered profound attacks, assault by the U.S. Counterinsurgency program of the 1960s and 1970s. It was a period that saw the emergence of the Hispanic or those that attempted to accommodate themselves within the economic political system of capitalism. It was formed also with the objective to advance the original goal of the Chicano power movement, which is an anti-colonial movement, which is rooted in our on land, on the need to reaffirm our right as a people to be on our land without any type of slanders, attacks, calling us illegal aliens or anything like that. And it was meant to build political power from within the Mexican working class to achieve self-determination and liberation. At that time, Unión del Barrio knew very clearly that it was a struggle to capture and advance the anti-colonial struggle for total liberation. When many saw it easier to just accommodate into the economic system, Unión del Barrio was steadfast that we needed to fight to abolish all those colonial borders and to gain access to our land, to our natural resources, and also to our labor. So Unión del Barrio upheld that political philosophy of total liberation and not accommodating into the economic capitalist system.
Uhuru. Thank you. And the same question, or not same question, but this question is also for you, Benjamín, about when Unión del Barrio and the African People's Socialist Party began our fraternal relationship, where our two organizations have enjoyed for so many years. If you can talk about, when that all began.
Absolutely, and the contact, we actually came into contact, not me personally, but they come into contact around 1984 through 86. We know for a fact that in we understand, or I understand, it was Omali, it was Comrade that had actually had the first contact with some of our members in San Diego. believe that we know that we came across the burning spear in San Diego, and it was the first time that specifically Comrade Ernesto began reading and analyzing and saw the correct political philosophy and ideology of building political dual and contending power of creating a philosophy and the necessary ideology that can guide national liberation struggles within the political borders of this empire. And so through the contact, we know that in 1986, Comrade Omali did participate in a panel discussion, Barrio, that spoke to how internal colonies that existed within the U.S. empire, and how those same relationship that the state had with Africans, but with Mexicans, the occupation of our communities by the state police in the form of the FBI, in the form of even the immigration authorities that continue to attack and continue to incarcerate our people at profound rates, the beatings, the lynchings, the attacks against our community. So we had that political contact back in 1985 through 86. And even throughout these past 30 years, it has been this relationship that even helped us really sum up the last period of struggle, understanding what was happening, what happened to our movement in the form of repression, what happened in terms of the co-optation of many political leaders, and even what we saw in terms of the incarceration and assassination of many of those leaders. And it forced us really to do a reflection. It's a scientific analysis as to what our movement really required in order for us to do a quantitative and qualitative leap into advancing liberation struggle. So we did a balance that was summed up in a document that we created called the Summing Up of the Last Period of Struggle, the Chicano Power Movement 1965 to 75, which built the analysis that in order for us to really liberate ourselves, we had to base our struggle scientific ideology and understanding of the world around us and our place in it. How do we advance political struggle with other nations that are colonized by the same enemy, with capitalism and imperialism.
And back to Chairman Omali Yeshitela, how would you sum up the significance of the political relationship that the African People's Socialist Party has had with Unión and Barrio over the years? How does it reflect the party's strategy for African independence?
One of the things that's made this relationship important, I think that this relationship does represent a certain maturation of the national liberation movements of our peoples. And Comrade Benjamín mentioned the era of the struggle of the Vietnamese people, which really, I think, influenced the consciousness of a lot of oppressed peoples around the world. In many ways, the Vietnamese carried the oppressed peoples of the world on their backs, even as they fought against the worst imperialism history has ever known. And one of the things that we were involved in, even as we were struggling with capital, imperialism, colonial capitalism, as we refer to it, in the immediacy of our situation as an internal colony of the United States. And we recognize, of course, that the African nation is one that has been forcibly dispersed around the world. But we also had to engage in serious struggle with the colonizer left, the white nationalist, communist, or Marxist movement. I use the term communist and Marxist, and not as an attack on Marx or communism, but these forces who characterize themselves as that, as they attacked us. They attacked us in the name of Marx. They attacked us in the name of communism. And so we had these running battles on a regular basis with these forces. And one of the things that one of the first engagements we had with Unión de Barrio was based on an article or something that had been written by Amiri Baraka, who was a leader of what I think was then called a League of Revolutionary Struggles, who at this time in his life characterized himself as a Marxist, and they were engaged in this building a new communist party or something to that effect. They characterized as a multinational new communist party. And their line actually liquidated their rights and the ability of peoples colonized inside the United States or by the United States, even in Puerto Rico, to lead and our own struggles. And they sort of characterized us essentially as dark-skinned white workers, and that somehow our liberation, our struggle were to function as auxiliaries to what they considered the real struggle of the working class that they call multinational, but it was a madness. And so the Mexicans, and there was an assault on Unión de Barrio in that. So I wrote a response to that. And that's one of the things that contributed to the discussion that Unión de Barrio and the party would have since that. And that's one of the things that I think is also critically important. We refer to ourselves as African internationalists. And we say African internationalists because, in some ways, because what was happening with Unión, what was happening with the Mexican national liberation and the African national liberation movement as it represented itself, especially in the United States, is that somehow we were bourgeois nationalists. And therefore, to say that we were struggling for the liberation of our people was something that was used to disqualify us as a genuine revolutionary force. And we wanted to make it clear, we are internationalists. Doesn't mean that we are Marxists, and we are not Marxists, but we believe in the validity, the value of science of investigation and analysis called historical materialism that was really refined and developed by Marx and Engels and people like that. And through use of this process of looking at the world, not from some preconceived notion, which actually offends the idea of dialectic and historical materialism, offends the science, to look at our reality not from some preconceived notion, but look at it just as it really is. And that is how we came to understand not only the conditions of African people, or certainly the circumstances, or certainly the context for our oppression and exploitation, but the context for the oppression and exploitation of Mexicans and other peoples around the world, and our relationship to what's called white people here and around the world. It's using science that we came to this conclusion. And this is part of what made the relationship between Unión and the African People's Socialist Party so important. Because the Marxists, as they call themselves, and I heard that Marx on one occasion said, all I know is I'm not a Marxist, and I can understand why if he met some of the people who I've met who call themselves Marxists. But the white left demanded that we see the critical component of our struggle, or to be at the point of production, as they call it, the point of production. This is where they talk about how value, surplus value, is stolen from the labor of the workers. We say, no. For the colonized people, the critical area of struggle is at the point of the bayonet. In this instance, we are talking about the colonial state in the form of the police, the jails, the prisons, and everything that keeps us locked into this illegitimate relationship that we have with imperialist white power. That's the question. And that's the question that speaks to the parasitic nature of capitalism. Capitalism was born as a parasite, sucking the blood and life out of Africans and other peoples, like the Mexican peoples, etc. This is what informed our understanding. This is why also the relationship with Unión was so important, because they came from that same general perspective. And it gave us a greater unity with forces against this ideological imperialist manifestation of what was called socialism or communism, that did more to turn people off communism or socialism than the imperialist government itself. So this was a really important relationship for us, and one that we really wanted to develop and nurture and do everything that we could to make it flourish, and to find every way we could to do this in some kind of united way, so that it's the position of the Mexicans and the Africans and all the other peoples, because effectively what we call African internationalism is simply using dialectic and historical materialist a method of investigation and analysis that Mexicans and other people use from their standpoint, from the perspective of their contact with imperialism. That's how they begin to define the world, not because of some preconceived notion based off the development of Europe, which came at our expense in the first place. And that's really important to understand, because people who talk about how capitalism was progressive, they say it's progressive because what it meant in terms of the development of Europe, from feudalism, now the workers free to sell the labor power, et cetera, et cetera. But all of that came as a consequence of land stolen from Mexicans, from Africans, from indigenous peoples and others, like all around the world. This rests upon our backs. Mexicans and this whole relationship, it's really important for us, just in terms of dealing with this critical kinds of question that defines the world. You have a minority population on the planet Earth in terms of white people who define history from their perspective and based on their experiences, and they require the rest of us to accept this as defining our relationship as well. So, that's part of the great significance of this relationship. And also, it's been powerful because we learn from each other. Because as quiet as it's kept, no matter how much you think you know about yourself, you don't really know about yourself. This is what dialectics teaches us anyway. If it's not also a knowledge of yourself as it reflected to the rest of the world around you, and especially other people engaged in the same kind of struggles you're involved in. And I thought I understood some things until I started going to San Diego, and a compañero, Benjamín has probably heard me say this before. I was just thinking, when we talked to him, he was asked how long this relationship has existed. I think it probably started before Benjamín was born. He looks younger than the relationship. But I went on my way sometimes driving through California, especially Southern California, as it's characterized, occupied Mexico, near the border, near the false border. And I would see Mexican workers at the end of the day with their plastic bags, Lucky's grocery bags and things like that, or Safeways, going up into the hills where they were living in caves and what have you. So they come down in the day and work for these white colonial farmers. And then I'm sitting watching television, watching the news, and then they would show on the news these white people who would come from various places to the border. And they come to the border and have the lights on to watch the so-called illegals come across. This was the most humiliating, offensive thing that I could imagine. And I'm saying, it's like the Mexicans aren't watching this as well. So, I'm learning so much more. I'm learning, like the same kind of national humiliation that Africans experience, the thin-skinned white people who name the rest of us niggers and spooks and wetbacks and the rest of that, and because white people and white power, enjoyed power, so much power that how they define the world and how they define us had a very profound impact. They're the ones who made us blondes and, and mutilate ourselves, and with Michael Jackson, of course, being the poster child for that, et cetera. They are the ones. That's the power of imperial domination. And even in places like Vietnam, where in South Vietnam, people would go to the barbershop to have their eyes clipped so to make them round to look like white people. That's the power of imperialism. We're breaking out of that, and I think this is ongoing. I think it's an ongoing process, and we've reached a critical point in history where the peoples of the world are going to take back our future, and Africans and Mexicans in this occupied territory, I think, represent a critical factor in the defeat of imperialism once and forever, and that we have a burden not only for the liberation of our own peoples, but for the destruction of imperialist white power that oppresses and exploits the whole planet Earth. Uhuru. Yeah.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
All right. Back to Benjamín. Can you tell us about the history of the Mexican people on this side of the stolen border? There is so much to say about this. Can you start with telling us how and when the U.S. stole Mexico and how much land that was?
Absolutely, yes. So the struggle of the Mexican people, has its origins in the resistance and indigenous resistance against European colonialism. 1492 and the European invasion, the war that began since that expansion, really defined the anti-colonial struggle that we've been engaged in ever since. Specifically, as a nation, really is a compilation of many indigenous nations throughout this hemisphere that existed before that European invasion. And when we look at the native, we understood and how we identify, our continent, it has many by native nations, whether it be Abya Yala, whether it be, or even Turtle Island, right? The concrete struggle of the Mexican nation, one rooted in that industry, and the U.S. invasion through war, through occupation, has its origins in a struggle to abolish slavery. By 1821, its independence from Spain, a vast territory that went from Oregon, California, Colorado, Texas, Nuevo Mexico, Arizona, Utah, all the way down even to Nicaragua. Mm-hmm. Vast area, vast territory that had gained from Spain through a anti-colonial struggle, rooted in really indigenous resistance. The U.S. assault through the ideological premise of manifest destiny, this this idea that white people had a conversation with God and be able to expand from one part of the country to or territory to another was really meant to expand slavery, right? Mexico had gained its independence and had abolished slavery by 1821. The struggle the contention of power that happened in Texas was precisely rooted in an economic relationship that the U.S. these settlers wanted to continue to expand in everything from wanting to expand slavery in the southern part of U.S. economy. Indigenous native nations did resist, and the technology or even the weapons to fend off that invasion. Mexico was invaded by in the War of 1846 to 1848. The Marine hymn, in fact, comes and is based on that invasion, as it starts, from the halls of Moctezuma. Right? When they talk about the halls of Moctezuma, they're talking about Mexico City, how they invaded the city, and through the point of a gun and pointing of weapons, they forced the nation who had just barely begun to give up half of its national territory. So what we know today, the political borders that were precisely drawn through this invasion, right? Which is what we have today. And the history right after that, the Mexican Revolution, the profound political revolution that took place in Mexico, had its socially for the Bolshevik Revolution, the struggle for land, the struggle of Emiliano Zapata were precisely a struggle for land, a redistribution of land to eliminate the hacienda system, what in essence was feudalism, and make sure and ensure that every had land to grow their food, to feed their family, to put a roof over their head. And the Ricardo Enrique Flores Magón, who actually did have a headquarters not only in San Diego but San Antonio, and eventually were captured by imperialism and the U.S. Army, and arrested Ricardo Enrique Flores Magón because of their ideology to the Mexican Revolution. And so history of struggle is really an evolution of this struggle to reclaim land, our natural resources, and to redistribute that in a way encompassing of what really is and should be rooted in understanding of an economy, right? So those kind of economic that the Mexican Revolution contributed a nation. And today, what Chairman Conrad Omali did sum up is slander against our people as somehow foreigners on our own land, right? As being slandered, being called criminals, but it's strategically meant to strip us from our historical memory. And that's why for Unión del Barrio, it's critical for us to always highlight that we are on our own land, that we are a indigenous nation that is still resisting, in different circumstances because of the development of capital and capitalism itself, historically and geographically as an indigenous peoples to this continent. And this is why, we view the political border as an illegitimate border, that there are colonial laws that over our lives, that have stripped us from our land, continue to exploit our labor, and that continue to exploit the natural resources that has made life very comfortable for many European settlers who currently occupy and control that we now know as the U.S. So we do and are a part of that history and legacy colonial struggle to reclaim our land, to reclaim our labor, and to reclaim the natural resources that have been stolen by this capitalist economic project known as U.S. imperialism.
Uhuru.
Yeah.
Uhuru. And to Chairman Omali Yeshitela, could you comment on the party's position on this land that is called the United States of America?
But I really would like to also contribute to the very enlightening comments that were made by Compañero Undersecretary Benjamín. Because if you look to the 15th century, when the Spaniards, many people refer to Mexicans and others as Spanish, but they're not Spanish. Spanish were white people. They come from Spain. Well, they're almost white. Much of the blackness has been washed out now, but came from Spain. You're talking about the 15th century. And you're looking at something like the same time frame, generally speaking, that Portugal went into Africa itself and initiated the slave trade. And when you talk about comrades and great revolutionaries, if you come to my house, you see Pancho Villa, and you see Emiliano Zapata, and you see Sandino from Nicaragua, and what have you. But these were forces who were in Sun Yat-sen. I don't have Sun Yat-sen, but these were forces that were engaged in struggle against white imperial power at the very same time Garvey was engaged in the struggle. And I'm wanting to make this point because that's one of the reasons why the relationship with the Mexican people and Unión Barrio is so important to us, because we can find ourselves in this little situation where we don't see dialectically how this whole monster that we're up against came into existence at the expense of all of us. And this is what the imperialism was born of. And in fact, what's interesting about that, Garvey had a relationship with Ho Chi Minh. Ho Chi Minh actually attended meetings in New York at Liberty Hall. And that the Negro World, which was the publication of the Universal Negro Improvement Association African Communities League of Garvey, also functioned because it was written in 3 languages or so that the Spanish or the English component of it was able to be helpful to forces like Sandino's forces in Nicaragua, because it could come to Nicaragua on the Atlantic coast where English-speaking forces were, and a section of the paper was not written there. So they were the Nicaraguan Sandino and those forces were able, we had that kind of relationship. What we're doing in many ways is just rebuilding a relationship that at one juncture was clear to us was necessary to fight this formidable enemy that we are all confronted with. I just wanted to point that out because otherwise we treat this phenomenon as this isolated place and et cetera. And it has never been that. The whole empire came into existence through robbing all of us. And there are quotes that you can find from people like Cecil Rhodes in the 19th century who talked about how he was walking through the streets of London. Cecil Rhodes is the white man who left England and went into Southern Africa and participated in killing thousands and thousands of African people and stealing the land that they now call Zimbabwe. That's now known as Zimbabwe, was known initially as Rhodesia. That's where De Beers mining diamonds and all of that stuff comes from. This is the time frame, and they were quite conscious of and stated that if we are to save England, if we are to prevent civil war in England, we must become imperialists. And then went into Africa to do these things. And that's also the rationale and explanation historically for the creation of this illegitimate entity that they call Israel, which is a military outpost for U.S. imperialism and taking the land of the indigenous peoples there. We've all suffered from this, and this is the thing that gave rise to capitalism, imperialism. I think is really important. That's why the white left misses the boat, because it cannot criticize its own existence. It can't criticize the existence of America. It can't criticize the existence of Israel. It couldn't criticize the existence of Rhodesia. And it can't criticize the existence of South Africa even to this point. That's what it's characterized as, because all of these entities came into existence as a consequence of the parasitic plunder of our peoples and our countries. And I just wanted to say that in terms of the land question for us in the African People's Socialist Party, we've always fought for clarity on this question. And we've always recognized, certainly for the party, we've always recognized that this land is the land of the indigenous people, that the national homeland of African people, no matter how much you like Kool-Aid and Miller's High Light, the national homeland of African people is Africa. And that African people suffer around the world because our homeland has been taken from us. It has been taken from us in Africa, where they have created these artificial borders, and colonial white power dominates all of Africa, even though that domination is shaky now. Unfortunately, not shaky because of an organized resistance from African people, but because it has to contend with China. And now for the largest growing economy on the continent of Africa, that's our homeland. It's the homeland of Black people. And African people suffer in Haiti because of the assault on Africa. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in Haiti. We suffer in North St. Louis because of the assault on Africa. And the conditions of Black people on the planet Earth have their origin in that initial assault and the continuing exploitation and oppression of Africa. You can't get around that. You might not like that because you've seen too many Tarzan movies, but that's the truth. And so we start from that point. We also say that African people exist as a forcibly dispersed nation that's in the process of consolidation through the revolutionary project that we are involved in, certainly as led by the African People's Socialist Party, African Socialist International. And so we are in the Americas, and that means that we are part of the revolution of the Americas, recognizing that this land is the land of the indigenous peoples, but struggle, real political struggle and real political power occupies concrete space, organizational space, territorial space, and what have you. But we say that the oppressors and bandits who have stolen the land of the indigenous people have stolen the land from our comrades, and we are in unity with the struggle of the indigenous people to reclaim their land, period. And in the process of doing what has to be done to make this happen, people now, we can have a principled relationship that recognizes that we recognize whose land this is, so that we don't inadvertently, sometimes inadvertently, sometimes consciously, this happens, unite with the oppressors of the indigenous people who have stolen the land. And the land theft is a critical component of the ongoing oppression and exploitation of the Mexicans and other indigenous people living in these concentration camps one of the concentration camps that they call Indian reservations. So you can end up talking about this land is our land, and whatever your intentions are, you are uniting with keeping the land from the Mexicans and other indigenous peoples. We won't do that. we recognize that this land is not our land. But the enemy, imperialist enemy of the Mexican people, that is our enemy. And we unite with the Mexican people in the struggle to take back your land. And we unite with the indigenous people in the struggle to take back your land. And in this process, we may talk, we will, I'm sure other kinds of relationship will emerge out of that, but Africa is our national homeland. And you know, you might want to become an Afro-Mexican, but you know, that's something that you'll have to work out. You understand? I mean, but it becomes less complicated once you're on the side of the oppressed people. That's why I'm not disturbed by the wall question or anything like that, because that wall is not going to mean a damn thing. When the revolution kicks off in this country, that wall is going to be torn down from both sides. And it's not just going to be the Mexicans involved in that struggle, because we need all the allies we can need in Oakland and other places. So the wall is, you know, that's why the real question, in my view, has never been the wall. I mean, how are you going to be upset about a wall? You weren't upset about that fence. I mean, I've seen in, you know, separating Mexicans from each other in Mexican territory when walls are being built all over the illegitimate state of Israel, and you don't say anything about that. So this is just a contest between the bourgeoisie, sectors of the bourgeoisie, to control that question and to control Mexicans and how Mexicans are going to be controlled, et cetera. But anyway, from our perspective, this land is the land of the indigenous people, and that ours is a firm, historically based, strategically defined, if you will, a relationship of solidarity with the indigenous peoples in the fight to take back their land, even as we fight to take back every square inch of the 12 million miles of square miles of Africa. Uhuru.
And we will be coming back to this incredibly powerful discussion with Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Benjamín Prado of Unión del Barrio very shortly. Chairwoman Penny, do we have any announcements?
Yes, I just really want to express my deep solidarity with this discussion, with the goals and the unity of the African working class in the form of the African People's Socialist Party and of the Mexican working class in Unión del Barrio. Just, it's very humbling and profound to be able to hear this and to know that this struggle for the liberation, the total liberation of the stolen land of the indigenous people from the tip of Alaska to the tip of Chile, that all of this land still belongs to the indigenous people. This is their land and it will be liberated, that Africa belongs to African people. All settler colonizers have to get out of Africa, and this is the future that's coming up. I just want to, before I go on, I just want to, and we are going to come back to this discussion, I want to thank people who have put in at blackpowerblueprint.org. Please go to blackpowerblueprint.org. I want to thank and salute Sucha Sura from Oakland, California, $20. Uhuru. Rosemary Keene, $25. And Rosemary says, great work, really appreciate that, Rosemary Keene. Janet Van Fleet, $115 from Seattle, Washington. Uhuru. Angela Pitt, $10. Declan Kelleher, $25. Uhuru. We also have Robert Wood put in $20 tonight. Janice Cant, $50. And we have Unity Through Lisa Watson, $25.
All right.
Sorry. Unity Through Reparations, White Solidarity with Black and Chicano Power. Marissa Laufer, $50 tonight.
All right.
And Marissa says, white people are learning how the United States was created, stolen land with stolen labor, in this crucially important webinar that African and indigenous people are resisting and building Black and Chicano power. Long live the real resistance. Uhuru. So We have raised $340 tonight,
right.
and I just want to say from the African People's Solidarity Committee tonight, we're going to put in $100 towards the Black Power Blueprint. So that means with that, we only have $588 more to raise tonight, which we can do this. Go to blackpowerblueprint.org. We're almost halfway to our goal. Let's just go ahead and raise those resources tonight, and to recognize what the chairman has said, that, you know, we as white people, as a tiny minority of the entire population of the planet Earth, brought untold violence towards indigenous people, genocide against the indigenous people, stole this land that just, you know, as Benjamín has said, there's been incredible resistance of the indigenous people for hundreds of years now, fighting back in every place, in every area, in every inch of this blood-soaked land to have their land back. And that this is the population, we as white people, this minority that puts our subjective point of view, imposes it on the entire planet as part of being the settler colonizers, the vicious colonizing population that lives at the expense of African and oppressed people, that African people, that, you know, Europeans went into Africa, assaulted Africa, invaded it, and turned African human beings into commodities for sale, that this is what built the wealth for white people. This was the land of opportunity. There wouldn't have been, and there couldn't be, this population of the white colonizer without, there couldn't be wealthy, there couldn't be the prosperity of the white population without this genocide, without the assault on Africa and the enslavement of African people, that everything that we have comes from and comes at the expense of African and indigenous people. And that, you know, the chairman talks about how the white left misses the boat, the real leadership, the only revolutionary struggle is the struggle against colonialism, to destroy white power once and for all, and to create a world that we can see a little vision of here tonight, the unity of all humanity, the end of war, peace, the end of borders on this planet, the end of whiteness, when African and indigenous people have power over their lives, when they have their land and their resources back. And that's what it means to take a stand for reparations to African people, to turn back over those stolen resources to the African Revolution, to be able to have control over their lives, like the Black Power Blueprint that we're seeing happening right now in St. Louis, and the kind of work also that Unión del Barrio is doing. This is the world that we want to live in. White people are becoming a greater and greater minority because we're not reproducing, we're committing suicide. Even in a few years, we will be a minority inside the borders of this country. That, you know, that indigenous people are winning their land back. This is the struggle. So this is a powerful, powerful program tonight. We want to, again, call on white people to go to, we have $25 from Kitty Riley.
All right, Uhuru
via live stream. Uhuru, $25 from Kitty Riley tonight. And just really want to salute Kitty Riley, who's out there in St. Louis working under the leadership in the Solidarity Organization, African People's Solidarity Committee, under the leadership of Deputy Chair Onizine Yeshitela. So, you know, we just really want to salute everybody. So far, we have about $530 or something like that to go. We can do this. Let's do it. Go to blackpowerblueprint.org.
Do it tonight. Do whatever you can. As white people, this is such an honor that the African People's Socialist Party has allowed us this platform to pay reparations, to rejoin humanity, to be part of this struggle. And more and more, we're hearing from white people who are looking for a future. As Chairman Omali Yeshitela said, if you see your future tied up with imperialism, you don't have a future. So this is the only future for us, is tied up with African self-determination, with the return of the land to the indigenous people. This is the only coherent way forward. And it's only here because we've been invited by the African Liberation Movement in the form of the African People's Socialist Party to be part of this. And you can be part of that too by going to blackpowerblueprint.org and making your donation now.
And we have $5 from Casey Mackey out in St. Louis.
All right.
And we have only $558 more to raise tonight. We can do this. This is nothing for the white community. This is going towards a future for all humanity to see the leadership of indigenous people, of African people, African workers. Is the future that this earth won't even survive with the continuation of white power going on. So we salute this event tonight, this incredible webinar, and just go ahead and go to blackpowerblueprint.org and let's make it to our goal of $1,000 tonight. We can do this.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
So now we're going to turn it back over to Director Akile for this powerful interview. Uhuru.
Uhuru. So we start with Comrade Benjamín. There's so much in the news about ICE and the wall at the border and the constant attack on Mexican and others coming across the stolen border. Can you talk about that situation and some of the work that Unión del Barrio has done around this question?
Yes, thank you again, comrades. In order to really understand how, this question of immigration policy, it's important to highlight that historically, U.S. immigration policies meant to exclude people, right? I mean, ever since this white settler nation, white men with property, right, meaning slave owners. And historically, it has continued that same trend, right, to make sure and ensure the so-called American way of life for certain people. And the current immigration policy as it is today, consensus, everything from establishing the U.S. Border Patrol as an occupying on the political border in 1994, which had as and has as is its objective to rate who comes in and who does not, whenever it's convenient for agribusiness, whatever needs. The borders are relatively open for people who are strong enough, young enough to take on the most difficult jobs for the least pay. And situation and capitalism goes into crisis, then it becomes much more restrictive in terms of it in or not. And but the current reality in the last 25 years under the neoliberal economic structuring of capital and capitalism into this economy. Globalized capital allowed goods and capital beyond political borders, but then built up actual physical boundaries to restrict people crossing from actually moving, right? Specifically, migrant workers, right? Or workers who have historically migrated back and forth, all of a sudden confronted with this political border under the 1994 military operations known as Gatekeeper, Operation Hold the Line, and Operation Safeguard. Military designed strategy designed implemented through the what was previously NAS, or the Immigration Naturalization Service, now then shifted over into the realm of UN. And so the criminalization, the Washington Consensus actually has a strategy of not only militarizing, but now criminal workers, whereas historically, workers who had migrated would migrate to the UN months. Many of them even go back seasonally, right? Specifically, there'd be Easter or Christmas, because migrant workers usually migration pattern. Since 1994, with NAFTA free trade agreement, the military order, we saw that there was a strategy to not only criminalize and migrant militarize the political border and create an economy around detaining or incarcerating and deporting the more than 11 million of people who are economically displaced because of this global capitalist strategy, right? And so what we see today is a whole economy around detaining people, a whole economy that many jobs and employment in the border patrol, in the form of immigration, in the form of prison guards, investing in the building of these concentration camps known as prisons, or private corporations are profiting off of the detention of people, in essence. Many people come, who work, who establish their families, who live, then all of a sudden are being criminal through these creation of laws. And it's important to highlight that it was underbuilt to actually criminalize the process of migration, that it was the Dem who actually implemented through this Washington consent, created the conditions, the laws, the colonial laws that then serve people in our community to terrible forms of incarceration and persecution. And so the formation even of the specialized agencies, specifically Immigration and Customs Enforcement, as a tool of terror to inflict fear, has grown to have tens of now cruising the streets in darkness and looking for migrant workers, going to their homes early in the night, going to people's place of work to try to capture and arrest our communities. And so the whole political economy around the migrant workers and migrant labor forms this economic strategy to really profit of a migration patterns that were provoked by the neoliberal capitalist project of going into Mexico, for example, through NAFTA, of displacing many workers in Mexico because economic policies that force many and force them to migrate to find conditions of employment. And so the reality, many of our community, and we say, as we did at the beginning of the program, right, we read any type of law that relegates our people as foreigners on our own land, that those migration patterns for millennia, even before there was the United States of America, indigenous nations have always migrated north, and different needs, different necessities, but the more modern form of migration was provoked by policy and even military policy in terms of U.S. invasions of certain countries, the overthrow of them throughout Latin America and Central America, specifically the situation in Central America. We had not only the Contras invading, war in Nicaragua, and then the Central American invasion, 1980s, and even most recently under Obama, who the democratically elected government of Manuel Zelaya, which is the most recent episode of U.S. intervention in Latin America. And what's important is that specifically in the case of Honduras, Manuel Zelaya was the reason for that intervention had to do with that actually aligned itself with the Bolivarian alternative for the peoples of Nuestra America, an economic alternative to U.S. global neoliberal capitalism, then to build a bloc of political power of South American nations being led by Cuba, Ecuador, Bolivia, Nicaragua, Honduras. And that was the reason why the United States invaded and provided material support for the coup to take place. And that's why we see today many people violence that was imposed by U.S. imperialism, precisely because it maintained a certain order that favored U.S. capitalism, U.S. neoliberal economics. And so people are fleeing, people are leaving the violence that has been and the economic conditions and misery that is the economic. That's why we have and we see that flow of migration coming northward, and what we entire infrastructure, political economy around. Again, it's not these political policy, these military policies are not meant to keep people out. What it's meant to do is to create so that if you're strong enough to cross a mountain, if you're go through a desert and survive, you're also capable of taking jobs for the least pay. And so this is the model that the U.S. economy itself on, is this cheap disposable labor force that is now to all forms of hostility, all forms of persecution in the workplace, in our communities. And that's precisely why Unión del Barrio has decided to take on of assuming a role of community level self-defense, where now our own community begin to look and see if immigration agents enter into our communities. And our objective is really to expose these agents, these ICE agents who come in, who try to separate families. And that the U.S. immigration policy has historically been a policy of family. You destroy a family, you destroy a community, you destroy the very fabric of what is a sustainable, peaceful type of existence. So we've been at constant war, and it's very clearly set up as a war against our people, and everything that constitutes a war, right? Whether it be people who are being killed at the border, who are being shot down, or being beaten, or being tortured by these immigration law enforcement agencies. And again, and that even though people may say, or there's a certain sector of the petty bourgeoisie within our own community that say Obama was a good thing, he was the people than any other president in the history of this country. And family separation of policy, state policy, colonial policy, there is no difference that we can say between Obama, Bush, and Trump, because Trump is only accelerating that process. It hadn't happened before, but it's simply accelerating it under white nationalist agenda. Very clear, very without any form of filter. It's very clear that he perceives us as animals. He said it so very openly. He sees the separation of families along the border as a necessary thing to supposedly stop future flows. And even though we know what family separation represents to our community, direct assault again on our very right to exist, land. We're in the struggle to really defend our communities from these types of what we call state terror, right? These agencies of state terror to really profit off of our people's labor and off of our people's incarceration.
Uhuru. And again, Benjamín, how do you and Unión del Barrio see the importance of the unity of African and Mexican people inside this country and around the world?
This is very important for us, precisely because we have the same enemy on the number one, right? The constant attacks, the hostility is not new. Where it is, it has different. It manifests itself in different forms. African people have always been a friend of the Mexican nation and of the Mexicans. We have seen the historic hostility, the role that African people have played in the creation of wealth in this country, suffering under the same conditions. We live in the same, we are neighbors to each other. The level and way in which our people will be free is going to depend to the degree that African people are free as well. That we have a common goal to liberate it, to have control over our labor, to have control over our resources, to be able to produce and reproduce it for ourselves, and not in the way that the U.S. and economic policy continues to exploit our labor, our natural resources, and the artificial divisions that have been imposed by U.S. colonialism by trying to create the subjective animosities, whether it be even in our barrios or even television, right? We see these stereotypes being promoted. So our to the liberation of African people here is tied to the liberation of other indigenous native nations here within the political boards. And it's strategically important because we are the majority. We are a majority workers. We are the majority of a labor force that can overturn the shit that we have with this U.S. Capitalist economic system, not within the political borders, but worldwide. And unsustainable for this so-called American dream to even continue to exist because it lives off of the misery of people the world over. Strategic objective to unite forces with peoples who are struggling for their liberation, because it is also a struggle for the liberations of peoples outside of the political borders. The U.S. economic project, because it is impossible for 5% of the world to continue to consume the amount of natural resources that is required to reproduce this style of existence, this consumerist culture here in the United States, because it is killing not only people around the world to sustain itself, but it's also killing our environment. It is destroying, it is creating an ecological disaster where we see the consequences of that, whether it be through different weather phenomena, sea level rising, or even the destruction of even the necessary elements such as clean water to sustain life on this planet. So it must end, and the urgency of it ending is up to this generation to really organize ourselves into and become part of a political organization that has that objective, that states that as its objective. Anything less falls into this whole neoliberal type of organizing that only reproduces and allows the system to continue to exist. And so that is why we feel that this is a strategically significant and important alliance that we need to build, that we need to consolidate, that we need to continue to move and push forward so that we can advance the revolutionary science to achieving our objectives of liberation in our lifetime.
And to Chairman, you have written and said that the struggle of African... Chairman, you have written and said that the struggle of African people is for the liberation of Africa and African people everywhere, but that still our struggle is part of the struggle of the Americas. Can you address that?
Uhuru, first of all, I just want to express my appreciation for the profound statement that was made by Compañero Benjamín. And I think I spoke a bit about this already, about the fact that the struggle of African people is also a part of the struggle of the Americas. That's what what's characterized as the Americas. I want to say that there, even among us, that language sometimes can serve to obscure the depth of the contradiction that our peoples are confronted with. The nature of a very foul social system that has come into existence through the theft of our land, our resources, our dreams, everything that we have. The millions and millions of people that have died and continue to die as a condition for the continued existence of this social system. That I was glad to hear Comrade Benjamín mention the fact that the assault on the environment, on the earth, began as a part of the imperial project that resulted in Spain stealing this land and Europeans stealing Africa and the rape and pillage all around the globe. You think about this, there's the whole strategy of killing the buffalo here, just wiping the buffalo out as a part of war that was being made against the indigenous people. It was not simply to kill the buffalo, but the buffalo was a really important aspect of the production for the indigenous peoples. It played such a critical role in destroying the buffalo, also contributed to destroying the people. And it's like everywhere the Europeans have gone, everywhere they have just made this horrible assault on nature itself. And of course, that's not hard to understand if we can understand that humans are part of nature, that there's this thing that comes with the European imperialist ideological assumption that somehow humans are separate from nature, and that this war that's made against nature for the survival and the benefit of human beings. But we're saying that humans are a part of nature. And that's been recognized historically by most peoples of the world. You destroy nature, you destroy yourself. And but there's a whole productive process that comes into existence through that. And the entire planet Earth, there is no way that we can survive. We can't continue symptoms of imperial colonial capitalist domination of our peoples, that we keep trying to fight to find a way to live better under slavery, a more a benevolent slavery, a more benevolent colonialism. Colonialism sucks the life out of peoples, and that our project has to be about destroying colonialism, destroying this foreign, alien, hostile domination of our peoples that gave birth in the process of coming into existence to this nasty social system that is known as capitalism, that we call colonial capitalism, wanting to make it clear and keep it before us all the time that it was the colonial rape of Africa, rape of what we now refer to as the Americas, that gave birth to this social system. I'm reminded, even when you look at and read, you know, like stuff that comes from people like Karl Marx, who talks about how capitalism came into existence through a primitive accumulation of capital, that somehow Europe moved from this feudalism to capitalism through this primitive accumulation of capital. And while there is a mention of interring the indigenous or native people or the aboriginal peoples in the Americas into the mines and things like that, and turning Africa into a warren for the hunting of black skins, for the commercial hunting of black skins. I think that if you look at the rise of capitalism and primitive accumulation of capital, you gotta say that this whole land that we're on constituted a part of the primitive accumulation of capital. The whole land. I mean, not just people working in the mines, that's just missing the boat in some ways. Not just the Indians, so-called indigenous Indians working in the mines, but the mines on this land. This land became a part of the primitive accumulation that gave birth to capitalism and all of this that we live on. And the significance of this relationship also is, as we move forward with this revolutionary project, that we also really fracture the territorial integrity of the capitalist colonialist state, to seize power in the various places where we are located contributes to fracturing the territorial integrity of the state. And when you recognize that in different places around the world, we see a certain kind of reaction among human beings. Like right now, Africans and Mexicans, we see this especially like in prisons, where Africans and Mexicans pitted against each other, and sometimes in our communities, and sometimes Africans, I hear Africans saying the Mexicans taking our jobs, which is really funny. You wouldn't have minded that under the first job you had when you got here. But the point is that they create these conditions, and what we have is Africans and Mexicans competing for resources within a colonial economy. And they play us off against each other in that fashion. And then you see the conditions in our communities that come through being deprived of what is necessary for creating life. And so it leads to mayhem, especially since you've got the colonial state that imposes itself on us. And we see misdirected rage and struggle, so that, often horizontal violence among us, because it's easier for us to kill each other and harm each other, to take out the aggression that comes from being colonial subject people than it is to get involved in the vertical violence against the oppressor that's responsible for everything that we have to live with. And the fact is that colonialism is horrible. There is no way out of this. And capital will reconfigure itself and become reconfigured at different times to meet its own needs and obligation. But the colonial relationship is one that's there. It's a permanent relationship. It's a constant. So capital and how it acts and how it looks may change, may morph this way, that way, based on the needs of the empire, but the colonial relationship is the constant. So however you call it, financial capital, however you call it, the constant is the colonial domination of our peoples. So we are experiencing that, however, and when there's a crisis in the social system, and this has always happened when capitalism experiences crisis, it always tries to shift the burden of the crisis onto the backs of the colonized people to get more blood from the African slave, to get more resources from peoples, in these other countries that they dominate, to bleed them, bleed them, bleed them. That's a constant. I mean, no matter, so whenever there's a crisis of imperialism, it always works to do that kind of thing. And I want to say that, I recognize that capital does act differently at different times. And we should recognize that also. But Africans, as I mentioned, even in the process of creating this thing that they call capitalism, have been dispersed around the world. First capital, Africans' first capital, sold on the market and what have you. And we are in all these different places. And we don't take this as just some abstract theoretical question. For us is how to win our freedom. And to win our freedom, we have to build revolutionary organization on the ground wherever we are, recognizing the connection that we have to each other as colonized, oppressed Africans, and the relationship that we have with other oppressed people, and what that relationship also is to the colonizer. And the colonizer, of course, that's all the white people are the colonizers, but you can distinguish sectors of the colonizers because there is a ruling class that is there, but it's the responsibility, it is the real responsibility of white people to distinguish yourself from the colonial ruling class. It's not good enough just to run out saying we are the 99%, because you're not. You never have been. And, you know, just look at that in terms of, I'm not just saying this to be naughty, but the fact of the matter is that in this world that we live in, some 80% of the people on the planet are trying to survive off less than $2 and less than $10 a day. That's 80% of the planet. That's not the white people in San Diego who just gentrify in San Diego every day, where you got people living in tents or something like I've never seen before. That's not that. That's the 80% of the people on the planet. Most people on the planet do not have clean water. Most people on the planet do not have access to electricity and what have you. You are not part of the 99%. At best, you're part of the 20%. And there might be this tiny percent of that 20% that gets most of it, but that's the reality we're confronted with. But white people are going to have to join with the rest of us, because otherwise what happens is, as this crisis deepens, and we see it, there you see contradictions in the white community that used to be peculiar to colonized peoples. So escalations of things like alcoholism, drug addictions, overdoses, a spike in the death rate among white people, which is extraordinary. Haven't seen this since the advent of capital colonialism. A spike in the death rate of white people. And you cannot solve this problem by voting for Bernie Sanders. And that's the critical thing that we're dealing with. The problem is that you got to unite. You got to be able to see your future outside of this history of repression and stealing resources. That's the way you really separate yourself from this stuff, not voting for Bernie. Because at best, Bernie only offers what he calls $15 an hour over a period of time. And he calls that socialism. When all the people I know who understand what socialism is recognize that socialism is in the workers have come to power, and they decide if Bernie and his people are going to get any $15 an hour. You understand? It's not some benevolent capitalism, which is what they're talking about. They're talking about a benevolent capitalism. And a capitalism that can come in, that can become, that you can make, you know, they say, well, you know, we want to have a good capitalism. We're tired of this bad capitalism, which is rotten. So what we're saying is that the North American and the white people and people in Europe can join with the rest of us, who and the majority of the people on the planet. And it's an absurdity that you should even think that you can live in secure communities here and in Europe, while the rest of the people who make your security possible, whose resources make your security possible, have to go, don't even have refrigerators. I almost said go to empty refrigerators, don't even have refrigerators and what have you. It's absurd to say that the peoples around the world who are oppressed and catching hell are supposed to be engaged in a struggle so that white students can pay their student loans, or so that the white old people can have retirement funds. But this is how the crisis is reflected in North America and much of Europe. That ain't our crisis. Our crisis is one that has us dragging our children across deserts, either in what they call the Americas, on the continent of Africa, trying to get into Europe, chasing our own resources that have got there already before us. we're saying that white people can take a stance, but you have to disconnect yourself from an assumption of a future under this horrible social system. And I'm here to tell you it's horrible. I'm here to tell you it has no redeeming value. I'm here to tell you it's responsible for killing people all around the planet Earth, even as we have this discussion. I'm looking at the Palestinian people who are in sorrow because the United States government is taking money from the United Nations that provided for some schools and something like that. The Palestinians are going to have to take their land, take their resources, and actually understand that there is no future on the colonial relationship. We cannot live as peoples of the charity of the people who stole everything they have from us. A charity that makes them feel good, you know, for exploiting us. So you should, this what we asking for, $500?
Right.
I mean, you know, that $500, I know it's there. I mean, it seems to me that we should get that $500 in the next few minutes. But because you should contribute to this project of ending this relationship, build another kind of relationship. Human beings have to be able to live together, but you ain't gonna be able to live together sleeping with imperialism and then you know, coming out every now and then to hang out with us. I mean, a man named Robert Sobukwe, who was the founder of an organization called the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, who used to always talk about the white people who love us. And he said the white people who love us are those white people. They ride our backs and they say, wow, they're so sympathetic to all the stuff that's happening to us. They hate the police killing us. They hate the fact that we don't have enough to eat. They hate the fact that we are stooped and bent over. They hate all of that, but they won't get off our backs. And what Black Power Blueprint is giving everybody an opportunity to do is get off our backs. And you can join in this process. You can join in this process because we're gonna have a future. And the question that is before all the white people on the planet Earth, it's truly the question that's before you, is that will you get on the forward side of history, or will you try to protect this way of life that's based on the exploitation and oppression of the majority of peoples of the world? Black Power Blueprint gives us an opportunity to get on the forward side of history.
Uhuru. And speaking of the future, back to Comrade Benjamín, what is the vision of Unión del Barrio for America? What would this look like?
Yes, comrade. It froze there a little bit, so I wasn't sure if the question was completely asked. But our vision is one process now. What we see happening that's why you know, part of the what's really central for us, you know, from all the way to Chile is one peoples, right? And so the significance of that in throughout what we call nuestra, or our Americas, right, is the fact that has always led by example, has created and built an economy, the socialist in character, and through been a unity process throughout the through the example of building this strategic alliance amongst nations, nations that have a socialist orientation. Specifically, an alliance for the peoples of Nuestra America is a step in really countering this capitalist economic project. So our Unión del Barrio sees that alliance building, right, of the Bolivarians, a necessary project to continue to support, to continue, because it's very clear, very clearly a new economic system rooted in the taking back the natural resources that belong to the peoples of Nuestra America, the peoples of all of Latin America, and creating what is being considered as a system where one nation, for example, has doctors, has educators who have been dispersed throughout Latin America and the world to ensure access to healthcare, that people are destroying colonial remnants of making sure that people know how to read and write, and also are building that alternative, utilizing the natural resources that is those countries. For example, Venezuela has tremendous amount of oil reserves, and it has invested in building housing. A vast majority of Venezuela, and with all the slanders that has talking how terrible this is in Venezuela, it is still a economy that is committed. The great majority of Venezuelans have to survive. That is guaranteeing that is dignified and that is not subject to U.S. imperial. That both Alliance for the Peoples of Nuestra America for us is important. That is throughout the United States, that is known within the Mexican community in particular, and looking at what's happening in Mexico with an important shift. We're not going to see a shift, but it's an important shift from the dominating two-party dictatorship that had existed there. There's a new president elect that is coming into power in December. It's important for us to have that relationship with Mexican workers, with indigenous peoples of Mexico, to form a necessary power to continue to advance and advocate for the building of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Nuestra America. We feel that has been at the forefront in this past 10 years of building an alternative to this economic system. And so that liberation process for us is significant, is important. We're going to continue to support that, and for when we spoke of strategies strategically, what is the role the Mexican working class here within the is really to look south as the future, that are in Spanish, nuestro norte es el sur. Our ideological north is looking down what's happening in the south, because it is an example of how nations and revolutionary processes can gain a level of independence from this capitalist system, which needs to be deepened, which needs to be a profound revolutionary struggle in those countries. But that is the root of our internationalism as well, because we do consider ourselves raza internationalists, and we see our future bound to what happens in the South in Latin America, not necessarily what happens politically here in the United States. It's a decadent system, and so we need to find our road looking in the South and these revolutionary processes led by revolutionary Cuba.
Uhuru. Well, I really want to thank, first of all, Chairman Omali Yeshitela for being here tonight.
Yes.
Benjamín Prado, Unión del Barrio, for being here. This has been incredible. I want to thank Director Aquile for just facilitating this brilliant discussion tonight, and what it means, for white people to be in solidarity with us, with this stand of the liberation of African, indigenous, and colonized peoples around the world, that this is the future, that we have to answer the call that Chairman Omali Yeshitela just laid out, that we have to distinguish ourselves from our own ruling class. We have to jump off this pedestal that sits on the backs of African indigenous people and join in genuine solidarity through reparations, through turning back over what has been stolen to the African Revolution and to the indigenous people, the return of their land. I really want to salute people who have given tonight. Also, we have Rose Latoul, $10. Betty Soto, $25.
All right.
We have Woody Cat, $10.
Excellent.
Ann Hirsch, $50
right.
tonight. And Ann said, salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela and a summation. Salute the summation of Comrade Leader Benjamín Prado. Thank you for allowing us to join the struggle by raising reparations. Uhuru. And we want to salute Kristen Fortin, $50 tonight.
Right.
So we only have $413 to raise now. We can do this. Go ahead and go to blackpowerblueprint.org. Put in $413 so that we can raise our goal tonight. It goes towards this African revolution, part of the Americas, the liberation of this land, the liberation of African people through bringing political and economic power into the hands of the African working class. We can stand in solidarity with that by turning back over the stolen resources from the system that sucks the blood of African indigenous people every day so that we can live at their expense, and that's no life at all. That is no life at all. We want to join the future. I mean, this is, where could you hear such a vision of the future? You don't hear that on some white leftist kind of program or video program or blog or anything else. There's nothing like this. Like Chairman said, this is not about Bernie Sanders. This is not about any wing of the Democratic Party, which is, in fact, a wing of the bourgeoisie in this country, continuing to want to maintain power over the state. So this is about something totally different. And even the environmental question that was raised tonight, the way that the system, the same system that wiped out hundreds of millions of African, indigenous, and colonized peoples, of course would destroy the earth. They have no interest in saving that. The environment in which human beings can produce and reproduce real life, that, you know, this system will take it all down with them as long as they continue to raise the money. We cannot be complicit with that. We have to find a future, be part of the future, and take up our responsibility in the belly of the beast, paying reparations, winning reparations for more and more white people to stand on the forward side of history. So I want to call on people to go to blackpowerblueprint.org. We can make this. We only have $413 more to raise tonight. We're going to do this. And we just have a few minutes left. So we wanted people to go there. We want Jamie, you have some announcements tonight.
Yeah, so first of all, let's say that
we have Maureen Wagner, $50. So we just have 300 and something.
And put me down for $20 myself for tonight. And please,
$20 from Jamie, Uhuru.
Keep digging deep in your wallets, comrades, fellow white people out there. This is our chance to stand up and be counted on the side of the oppressed, on the side of African people at blackpowerblueprint.org. And those announcements.
We only have $343 more to raise tonight.
And we can do that.
We can do that. We can do that. Keep going to blackpowerblueprint.org. Even after this program is over, this has been incredible. Continue to share this. Go to youtube.com/blackpowerblueprint to subscribe, get notifications, be part of this process, build this movement, win it among other white people,
like it, share it.
Solidarity Movement is doing.
Yes, absolutely.
KC, $13.
All right, Uhuru and KC.
So we only need $330 more tonight.
Wow.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
We can do this.
We can do this. And coming up next week, we want to invite everyone to please join us back at the Black Power Blueprint Live next Tuesday. That is September 25th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time at Black Power Blueprint YouTube and Facebook, same pages that you're watching tonight. And the guest next week is going to be a longtime member of the Uhuru News team, Norman Richmond, with the Diasporic Music. It's a fantastic addition to Black Power 96 right here in St. Petersburg and internationally online. Also, he has an article in the Burning Spear newspaper.
Every month. And also he's going to be talking about, in particular, John Coltrane,
yes,
the brilliance of African music and jazz in this country. The program next week is going to be called A Love Supreme, which is one of the great albums of John Coltrane. And, we'll be talking with him, who just is so knowledgeable about African music in every form. So that's going to be a profound, very interesting, very, very, very fantastic program next week. So we're really looking forward to that.
Yes, African culture has always played a big role in the revolutionary struggle of colonized people. So that's next week. And please do also check out the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party in St. Louis from October 6th to the 12th, bringing together African people from all over the world to plan the next 5 years in the struggle to liberate and unite Africa and African people everywhere. And for that, you can go to apspcongress.org to register.
And just let you know that we also have $10 from Comrade Raya Fogarty out there in St. Louis. So we only have $320 to go tonight. Only $320. We can do this.
Absolutely, we can. And the rest of the announcements are the One Africa, One Nation Uhuru Book Fair and Flea Market.
Will be this weekend, this week in Philadelphia, at Clark Park.
All-day outdoor festival, and it's Saturday, September 22nd in West Philadelphia's beautiful Clark Park, as Chairwoman said, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., featuring live music, poetry, and spoken word, 100 vendors, African authors, free education resources, and the Children's Circle. The Uhuru Book Fair and Flea Market is an education and economic development project of the African People's Education and Defense Fund. And that's putting power of education in the hands of the African community. And a rain date for that is Sunday, September 23rd. Please volunteer, and vendor opportunities are also available. For more information, you can go to uhurubookfair.blogspot.com, or you can call 267-875-3532. Also, please do come out to Oakland, California and St. Petersburg, Florida this November and December to be part of baking and selling 10,000 Uhuru pies for the Black Power Blueprint. From November 15th to the 22nd and December 20th to the 24th. Brigades will meet at Aquaba Hall for overviews and summations. We'll be out front in the community selling Uhuru pies, baking, phone banking, and winning people to support African self-determination and reparations to Black Power Blueprint in a delicious way. And in Oakland, you can be part of selling pies at 12 pop-ups on Thanksgiving Day itself, followed by a Reparations for Black Power Blueprint dinner at Aquaba Hall. Don't miss this opportunity. Get to Oakland or St. Pete. We can provide housing and advanced webinar trainings. If you can't come to us, there's plenty that you can do online out there or by phone. So wherever you are, please contact us. Sign up now. Email at volunteer@uhurupies.org, or you can call 800-578-5157.
Uhuru. Just to say that we also have noticed that Kitty Riley from the Solidarity Committee out in St. Louis is putting in $30 more. So that puts us at $290 more that we have to raise, and that's all. So you can go to blackpowerblueprint.org and put in those resources. We want to profoundly thank Chairman Omali Yeshitela tonight. Thank you so much. It's an incredible honor. What an incredible discussion. And we want to thank Undersecretary of the Unión de Barrio, Benjamín Prado, for being here tonight and having this profound discussion to see, just this deep unity of solidarity, of genuine international solidarity between the colonized African working class and the Mexican indigenous working class on this land, on this stolen land that is called America. And, we just appreciate this discussion. And, thank you so much. Thank you, Akile, director of the party's Agitprop department. And we are looking forward to the Congress, the 7th Congress, which is coming up in just a few days, practically, out there in St. Louis. And I know that we will be seeing members of Unión de Barrio at that Congress as well. So it's going to be a historic thing. Oh, we want to thank David Rold from Boston, $10. So we only have $280 more. So just go to blackpowerblueprint.org, put in the $280, and we will have a victory for this night. And, we just really appreciate that. So we're Chairman. We just wanted to know if you had any last words. We just have a couple of minutes. Thank you. And if you had any last words for tonight.
I want to just again express my appreciation for the show and to express my appreciation to compañero Benjamín, Prado, and to Unión de Barrio, fraternal organization and ally in our struggle for national liberation. And one of the things that makes this discussion and this relationship so important, as I mentioned earlier, it puts us on the right track of understanding that the critical struggle we are involved in is a struggle against colonialism. And when we talk about the working class, we are not limiting ourselves to some kind of destruction about the point of production or trade unionism. The fact is that the majority of the peoples, the Mexican and African people, are workers. Colonized people are moving to take possession of our resources and our freedom. And we have a party Congress, the 7th Party Congress, that is happening in St. Louis from just a few days. It is one of the most important events that will have occurred for African people, certainly in the last 100 years. It is a situation where workers, African workers from Europe, from Africa, and in Africa will be participating in this Congress. And this is a Congress of the African working class. It is a Congress of the African workers that are involved now, concretely preparing to govern. And this Congress is one that will enhance our vision and actually correct our practice and move us closer to a real capacity to become self-governing people over a totally liberated, united Africa and African people around the world. That's going to be in St. Louis under the theme African People's Socialist Party attachment. So I look forward to seeing everybody there. You can go and register at apspcongress.org, and you should register now because more and more people are coming, and we want to see you there as well. Uhuru, Uhuru,
Uhuru, Chairman.
We can win. We are winning.
We are winning.
Winning.
Uhuru. And just want to thank you, Chairman, and any last words from Benjamín Prado. Uhuru. Uhuru. Just want a couple of last words from Benjamín Prado of Unión de Barrio before we close out tonight. Just really want to thank you again for being on. This has been profound.
Just profoundly honored to have shared the space. We will continue to build this struggle. We will see you at the 7th Congress. We are very excited to learn from the Black Power blueprint so that we can also replicate the best of our people's struggles so that this way we can work for ourselves as opposed to work for other people. Important and significant. Very honored again to have shared this space, and We'll see you all in St. Louis.
Through. And unity through.